Okay, this is number 3 in my understanding maps sessions. I'm here on the talk map. You'll recognize it if you've looked at any of the other videos that I've put out. I'm going to double click on that one. There it is in numbers. If I pull it up on 3D, it's looking a bit squashed, so I'll do that. This map, very often, because there's so few numbers in it, is easier to interpret looked at in numbers than it is as that 3D shape. Basically because what it is really just one map in 3 pieces, because what I've got is I've got a map there a bit. So if I imagine that's a 2D map there, so that's one of them, and then here's the second one, and then here's another one, and this one is for 600 milligrams atmospheric pressure, and this one is for 800 milligrams atmospheric pressure, and this one is for 1000 milligrams atmospheric pressure. Unless I want to make changes that are going to affect all versions of where I'm going to drive the car, I may well not need to touch this one. If I want to make changes to a map, I may well need to just ignore that one, because I may well say to myself, I don't want to tune an engine but have it tuned such that if I go to somewhere like the Alps, that tune will still be functioning and I've got a risk of blowing up the turbo while I'm on holiday. So it's possible, isn't it, that if you were playing around with a map and looking at what does this map do, that you wouldn't want to touch this end of it. Now, because this is the end I can see most clearly, I'm going to talk about this end. So while I'm talking about this end of the map, don't assume I'm talking about 600. I'm really talking about up here, 900, 1000. I'm talking about people driving around at or near sea level. Doesn't matter. I mean, they could be at 800. It doesn't matter. But just don't think, oh, I'm talking about 600 because 600 is nearby. So we'll ignore that, and we're just going to talk about this bit. So what we've got is revs per minute, and then we've got here the amount of fuel. And so what this is, in effect, is a limiter. The amount of fuel that I was injecting was totally dependent on me pressing the pedal down, or at least I thought it was. I'll press the accelerator pedal and out will come fuel. And if you remember back to the last video, if you watched the last video, on the last video I pressed the pedal down, and according to the map, at the maximum I got 70 milligrams. But if you look at this, as I go across here, and again it might not show in this video, but the maximum is 52. Now, because this is, like I said, a little bit more difficult to interpret as 3D, I'm going to go back to the text view, and I'm just going to go across that bottom one. I'll just move that out a little bit further, but I'm just going to go across that row. Now let's have a look at what's happening. First of all, we've just said the maximum amount of fuel that this map is going to let me inject is 52. So it doesn't matter that the accelerator map, the driver's wish map, says 70. This is only allowing 52 milligrams. And that's why people often call this the torque map, because it's limiting the torque, because it's saying to itself, I'm not going to let you inject more than 52 because that would produce too much torque and might damage the engine or the clutch, so I'm not going to allow it. So there you go. Right, let's have a look at what's happening. Here we've got low or no revs, and so what we've got is no fuel injected anyway, or you could say no limitation, but it doesn't matter because there's no fuel being injected. And here we're at or below idle, so it's a low value. We're looking at about 30, and then when we're around about idle, we're at about 30. Of course, we're not actually looking at idle when we look at this, because idle is something completely separate. So this is what I would get if I was trying to hold the pedal at idle, but of course I probably can't, because the ECU would take over and say, well, you don't need to do that, I'll do that with the idle map. So again, this is a sort of set of values that I'm not really likely to find myself using. But of course, if the idle is 800, then this would be the point at which at 1000 the accelerator, driver's wish map and this torque map are cutting in. So now I've got an injection amount, so let's say that's 30. I then inject 40, I get more revs. I inject 48, I get more revs. 51, I get more revs. Now, of course, once I get to 51 or 52, nothing happens. Now, you might think, oh, I'll just carry on injecting more and more and more fuel. But of course, if I did that, it simply wouldn't burn and there would be clouds of smoke behind the back of the car. And the designers have taken that into account. And so what they've done is they've said on this map, no, 52 is the maximum. You've got enough air to comfortably burn 52 milligrams per stroke, so 52 is the maximum. And again, you might think that 52 then would stay as a level. So all of these, because I want to go faster and faster and faster and get more and more and more revs, would all stay that high, but they don't. They stay more or less at the same value, but they slowly fall. And again, this is simply a matter of protection of the engine and efficiencies. So in other words, there is no point in injecting that exact same amount of fuel when we get up into these rev ranges, because the engine can't cope with it. The speed of the engine turning over and the airflow in and out and the injectors opening and closing is simply getting difficult to inject these amounts. And so what's happening is the designers have tailed it off very slightly, and again, it helps protect the engine, it helps protect the turbocharger, and it helps protect the environment, because there won't be too much black smoke pouring out the back from unburnt diesel or diesel that's only partially burnt. Now, there is something that's worth watching at the end here. Although these values fall slightly, and some tuners might think, oh, well, I won't bother with that, I'll just keep these constant. But let's say that they will allow those to fall slowly. There's quite a drop off towards the end. And this again is a safety mechanism. The designers have decided that somewhere around about 4,500 revs, almost at 4,800, you're about to over rev the engine. And so what they've done is they've cut the fuel. They haven't cut it completely like on an old petrol engine where they might decide that something is going to cut completely and you can hit a limiter and it cuts completely. They haven't decided to do that, but what they've decided to do is make a cut, and you may notice that. So you might be trying to go faster and faster, accelerate more and more and more, and then discover that not a lot is happening, because I'm now injecting about the same as I was right back at the beginning when I first pressed the accelerator. You could argue that that's almost like a warning, because what I've got next is a cut. And at that point, nothing. I'm not injecting anything. So it doesn't matter that somebody is pressing the accelerator and demanding more fuel to be injected via the driver's wish. This map is going to limit things to 52 anyway, and when I get to the absolute maximum end, it's going to just cut the fuel to protect the engine, and it's going to cut the fuel to protect the turbocharger or maybe the gearbox. But basically, the designers have said to themselves, if we allow people to drive and pour fuel into the engine up at this end of the engine, all they're going to do is damage it. Now, of course, if you're a racing driver and you want to rebuild your engine every other week, doesn't matter, does it? You can risk having anything you like at this end and risk doing as much damage as you like. But the designers have decided that for this, being sold to the average guy in the street, this is a sensible set of values, so this is the set that we'll use. Right, I'll stop there.